Welcome to another edition of Through My Lens. I'm your host, Karen Jackson. And Through Our Lens podcast is an opportunity to highlight, to feature, to sit down, to talk to men and women who have not let their setbacks, circumstances, or their challenges define who they are and what they can accomplish. And I am excited today to have a special guest, Lois Elrich. She is the president of Solid Blend, and she's also the CEO and founder of Real Change Business Coaching, LLC. Thank you so much, Lois, for coming and being a part of the conversation today.
Thank you for having me, Karen.
Great, great. So tell us a little bit. I know I just, threw off a couple of titles, but tell us what you do in Real Change Business Coaching and tell us a little bit about Solid Blend.
Okay, so we'll start with Solid Blend and transition into Real Change. So at Solid Blend, when I started working there, when the company was formed, I was responsible for anything administrative, all the HR, um, all the accounting, finance, sometimes IT work. You know, you wear multiple hats when you start a business, and you just do what's got to be done. So I did that for, I think, 17 years, and then learned about coaching, which is where Real Change Coaching comes in. But I learned about coaching and went on to become a certified coach, and then realized my true passion and my true value to the organization is around people, which that's where my heart's always been, is how do we treat each other at work? You want people to feel valued at work and supported. And so through the coaching, I started focusing on organizational health in the business, our values, getting clarity on what our values are. What does that behavior mean? When we say that, we're kind and humble, or we're rapid responders. So hyper focused on culture, how we treat each other, our values, building trust, coaching the team when we need to, creating alignment when there's misalignment, lack of clarity. And so I just really thrive in that area. And it's been a real game changer for the organization. And so I decided to start my own coaching business and do the exact same thing. So I'm doing executive coaching. I'm helping organizations figure out what their values are. What behavior does that look like? And when people don't, when there's conflict, there's always a lack of clarity. So I help people get clarity, and a lot of team alignment work, um, building that trust. So it's taking the same model that I built in Solid Blend and applying it with the work that I do with other organizations.
Oh, wow. So talk to me a little bit about, you mentioned, I have a couple questions based on what you talked about. I heard you talk a lot about juggling and handling multiple tasks. A lot of times, as business leaders, as a business owner, entrepreneur, you really have to understand how to better juggle multiple um, responsibilities and tasks. How did you get into a rhythm? What made you flow in terms of helping to learn how to better juggle multiple tasks?
Sure. So I did juggle a lot. I juggled a lot, and I think a lot of us do that.
Mhm.
It comes down to prioritizing and asking yourself, should I be doing this at this very moment? And maybe there's someone else who should be doing it. And so
Mhm.
that's what I learned that helped with all the different things that I was doing. Was I realized some of the stuff I was doing, really someone else should be doing. They were more qualified and skilled.
Mhm.
So we hired an official, bookkeeper, a controller who has the background and experience to do the things that I was doing that needed done. But it was learning how to take a look at the stuff I was doing. And again, asking myself that question, should I be doing it? Is there someone else who would enjoy and who enjoys doing that? And then learning to delegate. So once
Mhm.
I did those things, it made it much easier to focus on the things that I'm really good at.
And I think that's so important that, especially as a business leader and an entrepreneur, you really have to know when you need to really bring in a coach to do some of the things and when you can handle those things on your own. So I think that's critical, and that's part of really knowing, getting in tune with what you're good at and your passion. You mentioned about your passion. Um, how important is that when you're thinking about a career or a new change in a career path, that you think about your passions? Speak about that a little bit.
I think that is the number one priority. Identifying what your passion is and then finding ways, opportunities to include that in what you do every day. Because
Mhm.
when you get to do the things you're passionate about, it gives you energy and joy. It's very rewarding. And so when you're considering maybe a career change or even something within the organization, maybe there's something you'd like to do that you're not doing, look for those opportunities and go ask for it. A prime example that we had several years ago was we started writing some newsletters, and I'm not a writer, but we did have someone who is very passionate about writing. And so we lifted that up to her. It was not one of her job duties, but we did go to her and ask her, hey, what do you think about doing this? And she loved it. So you have to keep your eyes open for those things, that opportunities where you can do what you're passionate about. For me, I'm just really passionate about anything that helps people thrive in an organization. We spend most of our time at work, and then we take that all home. So finding your passion is very, very important. Money's only going to satisfy you for so long.
And I think that is so critical. Another thing you mentioned too is about the importance of feeling valued at work and creating healthy teams and healthy business cultures. Talk to me a little bit about that. I remember reading a recent study where it talked about the top qualities that help to retain employees. And one of the top things that they mentioned was feeling valued and the employee feeling as though that if they had a concern that you know it was not just swept up under the rug. There was a system in order to address those concerns. Those were like the top two traits and characteristics of what helped to retain people uh, in organizations. Do you agree with that?
I totally agree. If you think about, I think it's 1,080 hours that we put into work on average a year. And,
Mhm.
if you show up to that place and you don't feel valued, um, you don't feel like the work you do is important and that it affects the overall organization or that you're appreciated, um, just imagine what that would feel like every day.
Mhm.
And every person in an organization is an integral part of that company thriving. It's not, no one person in an organization is what makes a company successful. It does take a team.
I think you said the magic word, teamwork makes the dream work, right?
Yes,
Talk
it
to me a
does.
little bit about. That's my favorite thing, because you can get done a lot more done when your team is working together than when you're working against one another. So when you talk about, what are some things that employers could do to make their employees feel more valued?
Mm. Well, there's a number of things you can do. And first, one of the most important things is to listen and really listen for what someone is saying to you. Put yourself in their shoes. A lot of times when we listen and we think, what is that? What that individual is saying? How does it impact me? So turn that around and listen to what are they really saying, and then letting them know they've been heard. That's really important. But the other thing that's really important, I think, in building a culture and helping people feel valued is creating clarity in the systems and processes that we work in. So most people want to wake up. Most people want to go to work and do a good job. Most people don't want to go to work and say, I suck at my job. So, if we can create clarity in the system so they know what to do, and it's just written out, documented, it helps everyone be more successful instead of trying to just muddle through it and figure it out.
Those are good suggestions. They really are. Let's switch gears a little bit. I definitely want to talk about leadership. Also, that is the key thing, I think. And one thing that this whole crisis has really, I think, showed us all is that leadership is needed more than ever in all different facets of our lives, and really in order to really make the changes that you want to see, whether it's in your community, it's in your workplace, or it's in the world. I think that leadership plays a key role in that. And how do you define a leader?
Mm. Well, to me, in my opinion, a leader is someone who is willing to do the work um, that everyone else is doing. So everybody gets busy and they need help. A leader is willing to step in and do those things as well. A leader is a person who will say what needs to be said so that the person is thriving, the organization is thriving, so they're not afraid to have conversations. A leader needs to be able to speak up and point out when maybe things aren't going the way we thought it was going to go, or if there's behavior that isn't in alignment. Leaders have to be able to do those things because employees and team members, they depend on that direction and feedback. And if we don't give it to them, then shame on us. We have to be able to speak up. And we also have to be able to, put ourselves in their shoes. You got to have some empathy and understand that these are people showing up and they're dependent on you to do your best and give your very best and run this company. So, I think you got to have a lot of integrity and discipline and really care for people. You really do.
I think that is so true because a lot of times you hear people say a lot of times they don't feel, not just that they don't feel valued, they don't feel that their employer cares about what they care about. And I think that's definitely an important trait. If you had to pick your must have top two leadership qualities, what would they be and why?
Uh, Honesty. You have to be able to admit when you've made a mistake to your team because you're human too, just like they are. So I think you need to be honest, humble. I'll probably go on with a couple of things. Um, but just your willingness to do your best and give it your all. But you got to be honest, you got to be humble, and you got to have drive and commitment. Um, I think those things are really important.
I agree. I agree. And talk to me. Let's talk a little bit about, because I think you made a very valid point. You mentioned that You have to be willing to humble enough and honest enough to admit when you have made a mistake. Talk to us about a time that you may have made a mistake, or you addressed that, and how did you address it, and how did it turn out?
Well, I can tell you that the way I handled um, letting a former employee go, I didn't handle it in the manner in which I had hoped to. Looking back on it, I wished I'd handled it differently. It's been a big learning uh, experience for me, that particular moment. When I looked back on it and realized I didn't handle it the way I had hoped to, um, I've vowed to never do that again. And to me, it's more of I have shared that with other people, that I handled that situation in a way that I, looking back, wished I'd done it differently. Um, so for me, I think that's just admitting my mistake, that I wasn't good at that. I didn't know how to do those types of things. But now I know how to have those conversations. But when you get to the point where you're having that conversation, that person will already know it. So I think for me, that's been one of my biggest mistakes, is the way I handled that situation.
Okay, okay. And talk to us about, give us one or two lessons that you may have learned, not the easy way around. Sometimes we learn from our mistakes. Talk to us about, I know you mentioned about that, about communication and showing the type of empathy or whatever you felt you needed to show. Give us two lessons that you learned
Mm,
throughout your career.
wow. A lesson for sure is, oh gosh, so many. Delegate. I was so afraid to delegate, so afraid to delegate. Everyone looked busy. I didn't want to give them too much work to do. So I just tried to keep everything myself. That was a really big mistake, and it was really holding the company back and my team back. When I wasn't delegating, I was pretty much saying, I don't think you can do it. And so that was a mind shift for me that I learned through coaching, my fear around delegating. And so I've learned that by delegating, I am instilling trust. I'm saying to that person, I trust you. I know you can do this. And that has been a very important lesson in business and in life, um, about learning to let go and not feeling like I had to do it all. Um, that I think that's been my biggest lesson. That and learning to speak up. I used to be very afraid about speaking up during strategic planning meetings or board of advisor meetings. I was just so timid and um, worried about what would people say, and I'm not that quiet person anymore. um, Speak up. Speak up what you have to say.
That must have been before I knew you, Lois,
Yes,
because I didn't.
I was quite quiet, and I got feedback from my team, from the leadership team.
Absolutely, absolutely.
They said,
So I think that's what were you saying?
I was just going to say, that was the feedback I got from my leadership team.
Mm,
Was, you're not speaking up. We want to hear what you have to say. So you're hurting the company by not speaking up. So those were two really big lessons: delegating and speaking up.
and that is so so true. And I think what you said was, to me, is the cornerstone of that lesson. And I've had to learn. I think we as leaders all have to learn the delegation, um, the delegation lesson. And I think the the critical point that you stated was, it's about trust, and sometimes it's really a trust that we have to deal with,
Mm,
not about us not really trusting the other person. It has to do more with ourselves. And so once you can trust yourself enough to know that you're putting this in good hands, whether it's a project or a phone call or whatever it is that you're putting it. You're trusting that other person enough, and I think once you and you're learning to trust yourself too, that you can let go whenever you feel you need to, and ask for help. I think it's so important. It's back to that teamwork, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So talk to me a little bit. I heard you mention. I know that you're a CEO and founder of Real Change Business Coaching, and you're a lead coach at Aileron. Tell me a little bit about that, and I want to ask you some coaching questions.
Gotcha. Well, Aileron's been an integral part of our journey in running our businesses, learning how to run our business instead of it running us. Uh,
Hmm.
I love Aileron and everything it stands for. Um, People who get engaged there, you feel supported. And I just, it made such a big difference in how we ran our organization that I wanted to get engaged, volunteer. What else could I do more? And
Hmm.
so through time, I ended up becoming one of their coaches. And now I'm their lead coach. And so my responsibility in that role is sourcing additional coaches, bringing them on to the Aileron brand, um, making sure we're developing as coaches, and then also how do we engage our coaches with our clients? You know, what is the process for that? So, and I just feel very thankful, you know, to have that opportunity to be able to give back and work with Aileron and get to do that.
So, for our listening audience that may not know more about Aileron and what they do, just give us a quick summary as to what do they do for small businesses.
Well, they teach you how to run your business professionally. So they have a DOC model, which is direction, operation, and control. And in those three pillars, they talk about, you know, culture, leadership, strategy, getting the work done, everything that it takes to run a business. And so they help you learn how to do those things. They help you figure out what your vision, your mission is, you know, create a strategic plan. You know, what does your company look like in the next 3 to 5 years? Before we got introduced to Aileron, we were just thinking, what are we going to get done this day or maybe this week?
Hmm.
We didn't know how to look that far out. So, and getting clarity, you know, people used to say, you don't communicate. And we didn't know what they meant by that. But when we got engaged with Aileron, we learned that what they meant was we don't know what our future is. We don't know what the future of the organization is. And so through
Hmm.
Aileron, we learned the importance of that.
And that's so important because your strategic plan is what guides your business. And if you're not clear of what that plan is, then it's hard for you to articulate it to your customers, your employees, everyone.
Yeah. And Karen, there are many businesses who are the way Ken and I used to be running Solid Blend. You know, we're getting up every day. We're just trying to get through the day, you know, service the clients, pay the bills. So it's very common to be there. And so when you can find a place like Aileron, where you've got
Hmm.
the support of a community who understands what you're going through, it's relief.
So talk to me a little bit about that. That was really my next question. Uh, how do you know when you need a coach?
Hmm. Well, when you're struggling having a conversation with someone, a coach can help you figure that out. When you're struggling internally with maybe the way you think of yourself as a leader and how you'd like to be the ideal leader, a coach can help you figure that out. Um, Coaches help create that team alignment. So when you've got people in the organization that really know how to do their job very well, but maybe there's a disconnect with someone else on the team, coaches can help build those relationships and create that alignment. So whenever there's blaming, complaining, frustration, lack of clarity. Coaches can help you get clear on all of that.
Well, that just with that explanation, I think we may all need to talk to a coach and talk out some of the strategies that we're wrestling with in our businesses. Talk to me a little bit about what's the difference between a coach and a mentor,
Good
in
question.
your opinion.
Yeah. So, a coach, we are focused solely on what you want to accomplish. We don't give advice. We're not therapy. Um, we're not counselors. We're focused on those outcomes that you're trying to accomplish. And our job is to help you do your best thinking and be that thought partner. A mentor is usually can be like a really long term relationship where sometimes you're giving advice, more so you're there. It's a mixture of advice. Here's what I've learned in my past, sharing that, and you're mentoring that person. Whereas coaching is strictly coaching. We're asking questions. We don't give advice. Um, that's the biggest difference.
Okay. So if someone was interested in securing a coach, what would be one or two questions that you would want to ask the coach to see if this was the coach for you?
Well, what I would recommend doing is if you're considering hiring a coach or working with a coach, is I would recommend finding a couple of coaches and have just a discovery session. Tell them why you're interested, what made you want to think about working with a coach, and then start just looking to see if you can build rapport. Is there a relationship between you, a connection, and the coach? That's really important because um, when coaches go through the coaching certification program, we've all gone through that same process, but we all have different personalities and experiences that we bring to the table. So I think someone who's looking for a coach needs to share with the coach what they want to get accomplished, and then do some digging, find out what is that coach's background, what's their experience, and then look to see if there's alignment with what you're trying to accomplish.
That's great advice. I want to ask you, I can't believe we're almost out of time and I still have questions, Lois, so we may have to bring you on again for part two. Um, I'd like to ask you, um, for someone who, say, you mentioned earlier, someone who maybe is eyeing a particular leadership role, maybe they have not secured that role yet in their organization, but they want to be considered possibly for a leadership role if one becomes available. What advice would you give them in order to be put themselves in the best position for
Hmm.
leadership?
Well, that's a good question. One, I would recommend finding a mentor or a coach, um, someone that you trust that's in that role that you seek to obtain, and get some mentoring and coaching from that person. What experiences can you learn from them? I would do that. But then I'd share my intentions with whoever I report to. Maybe it's someone in HR, but find someone to share your intentions so that they know, because we can't assume, everyone at work can't assume that we know what you're thinking. So if you don't speak up, so it goes back to that communication and speaking up. You have to share what your intentions are and what you want to do in the organization. So I would do those two things. Definitely seek someone that's in the role that you seek to aspire to be in, learn from their experiences, get some mentoring through them or coaching, and then, share what your plan is. This is where I see myself in 2 years.
That's great advice. That's great. And and that's the I think that's the caveat for a lot of people because sometimes we go to work, we work hard, and We let people see that we're working hard, but sometimes it's just as important as to have that conversation to let, your immediate supervisor or whoever is in that leadership position know where what your goals are and what you would like to accomplish. I think that, opens up a whole lot of windows and doors that you might not have even, maybe your employer may not even thought about.
Right. And you might even ask your employer or whomever that person is that you're having that conversation, where do you see me in 2 years? Here's where I see myself. Where do you see me? And how do we create a plan to get there? So it's
Mhm.
really about developing those one-on-one conversations on where you see yourself in the future.
That is so important. That's good. That's good. And I don't think we do enough of that. We may talk to our mentors and coaches and things like that, but I think it's also important for us to be able to develop those types of communication dialogues with our immediate supervisors or our leadership team where we're working. So I think that's excellent advice. I can't believe we're out of time, but I have to ask you this question. This is a question that I always ask all of my guests. The latest research says that by 12 years old, we have developed our self awareness, our self concept of who we are. So I always ask people, what would you say to your younger self
Mm.
as you look back? It's
Speak.
always good, right? In hindsight, it's wonderful, right?
Right. And, I would tell my younger 12-year-old self, speak up, stand up for yourself. If you don't do it, no one else is going to do it for you. You've
Mhm.
got a voice and you're valuable. That's what I would tell every 12-year-old person. Speak up, follow your heart, do the things you enjoy doing that make you happy.
I think, of course, speaking up, but following your heart. That goes back to what you were saying before is, knowing your passion, know what you're passionate about, and not be afraid to pursue those passions.
Right. And I'd also like to share that at 12, there's no way we have the mental capacity to be able to really, the cognitive skills to really know what we want. And so sometimes we don't really learn what our true passions are and what we're really great at till later in life. I mean,
Hmm.
I'm in my 50s and it took me that long, you know, and I love it. So the more you can find out, the sooner you find out what your passions are, that's what I would highly encourage.
And I think that's great advice too for parents and aunties like myself um, to encourage our young people to do some things to help them discover who they are, what they're good at, and what truly makes them happy and makes them passionate. I think the more and the sooner we can do some of those things, it makes it a little easier for them. They don't have to figure it out when they're 50 like us, right?
Right. And we, one little final bit of advice is, when we're doing that with our children and I have grandchildren that I have these little conversations with, we have to remember they're not an adult like me and they don't have my life experiences. So
Absolutely.
we have to remember that they are the age that they are.
Right. Right. And talk to them at their level that they can understand.
Right.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, Lois, this was a great conversation about lessons in leadership. I hope you enjoyed yourself, and we're going to have to bring you back again. This is an ongoing series. There's some new research that are coming out about women in business, and love to get you and a couple other panelists on to just talk about it. And because I think we have to, as women and men, not that we're excluding men, um, that we all have to, like you said, have empathy and compassion for one another and help us all along our journeys. Because once we come together, we realize that we're not alone. Someone else is maybe been down that path and maybe can give you some advice to help you avoid some pitfalls or some mistakes that they made to make your journey a little easier and smoother. So we appreciate you taking some time sharing your leadership, your expertise, your coaching, and we'll have to have you back again real soon.
Well, thank you, Karen. It's been a pleasure.
God bless, and you have a wonderful day.
Thank you. You too.
Bye bye.
Bye.